We're in Esther chapter 9 tonight. You find your place there. We're about to get Esther wrapped up. We will finish next Wednesday night, and then next Friday we go to Branson to see Esther. So, yeah, and so I'm going to give you a little bit of a heads up. There is a special treat next Wednesday night. So I'm not going to tell you what it is, but how many of you were here and a part of the Jewish, when we studied the Jewish festivals? And you remember how every week Lisa brought a special treat? So we will hearken back to those wonderful days of yester month or whatever, that when we would have a treat every Wednesday night. So you don't want to miss next Wednesday night. There'll be one of Lisa's special treats, and then we'll wrap up next week and then go to Branson that weekend. So a lot of good stuff, a lot of exciting stuff in the coming few days. But tonight we're on chapter 9. So the story of Esther is winding down. If you remember last time, Esther has made her request known to the king. She said, Haman has plotted to destroy my people, the Jews. And so Haman is hanged, and the decree, it isn't revoked, but instead a new decree is issued where the Jews can defend themselves. So on certain day, when the enemies of the Jews were to rise up and slaughter the Jews, now on this same certain day, the Jews can basically defend themselves. That's the new decree. So we're going to pick up in verse 1 of chapter 9. Now in the 12th month, that is the month of Adar, on the 13th day, the time came for the king's command and his decree to be executed. On the day that the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, the opposite occurred, in that the Jews themselves overpowered those who hated them. The Jews gathered together in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus to lay hands on those who sought their harm. No one could withstand them, because fear of them fell upon all people. And all the officials of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and all those doing the king's work helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. For Mordecai was great in the king's palace, and his fame spread throughout all the provinces. For this man Mordecai became increasingly prominent. Thus the Jews defeated all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, with slaughter and destruction, and did what they pleased with those who hated them. And in Shushan, the citadel, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. Also, Parshandatha, Dalphon, Aspatha, that's easy for me to say, right? Poratha, Adalia, Aridatha, Parmashta, Aristai, Aridai, and Vajasatha. All of those guys, yeah. The 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, they killed, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. Okay, let's talk about this a little bit. So we got a lot of bloodshed going on here. So basically, rather than the Jews being annihilated, the Jews rise up and basically slaughter their enemies. Now, my question, I'm asking you to think a little bit tonight. I know it hurts, but I'll try real hard. Who is to blame for all this bloodshed? And I gave you a list of options, and I want you to circle all that apply, that you think are responsible for this bloodshed in the kingdom. All right. So I'm just gonna kind of call these out, and you tell me, do you think that they're to blame or not? All right. What about the Jews? Are they to blame? Okay. And what way do you think they're to blame? They rose up with swords to defend themselves, but if they hadn't have done that, what would have happened? So if someone is trying to kill you, and in defending yourself you kill them, are you to blame for their death? Not really. So I would say that's not one that I would circle, really. How about the enemies of the Jews? They're responsible. How about Haman? Oh, yeah, he's responsible. How about Esther? No, it's not her responsibility. She's not responsible that this bloodshed took place. She's only enabling her people to defend themselves, right? How about the king? Maybe more than anybody, the king, because he's the one that created this horrible situation to start with, and then basically just kind of, pulls a pilot and washes his hands of it and say, well, y'all take care of it. He was, maybe more than anybody, he is responsible. How about God? Okay, so here's what you hear sometimes when you read a story like this in the Bible about all these people getting slaughtered or killed or whatever, or the people of Israel going in and wiping out a nation or whatever. You'll hear people sometimes say, well, how could God let this happen? How could God do this? Okay, but think with me. Again, I'm asking you to think a little bit tonight. Did God create this situation? Did He create this mess? No. Everybody but God created it, right? Haman created it. The enemies of the Jews created it. I mean, in some ways, you could even say the Jews themselves created part of it, because by their rebellion, they ended up in Persia to start with. And people say, well, God could have done something about it. Just because God can doesn't mean He's obligated. And we get in this thing where we think that we can create this horrible, terrible situation because of our sin and our rebellion, and then it's up to God to keep us from reaping what we've sown. And it doesn't work that way. All right? Bad things happen to bad people. All right? And who's bad people? We all are, right? The idea is that we live in a fallen world. So I don't remember, it's been a little while ago, but I don't remember if I got sick, I had something happened, and someone, in an effort to make me feel better, said, well, Satan's working against you. Satan don't want, he don't want you well, he don't want you preaching. That's why. And I said, and I wasn't trying to be mean or flippant or sound holier than thou, but I just said, I really just think I got sick because I caught a cold. I don't think that it was some attack of Satan. I think it was the fact that I live in a fallen world where we have sickness and disease and people hurt and people die, and that's just the way it worked. I mean, it wasn't God's punishment of me, nor was it Satan's attack on me. It was a situation of living in a fallen world. Now, whose fault is that? Well, you can trace it back to Adam and Eve, but I've had my share in it as well. And so I just say, and I probably labored over that longer than I needed to, but I just say that to say I hear God blamed a lot for the world's tragedies. And God, whatever's wrong with this world, it ain't God's fault. I mean, you can lay the blame at anybody's feet you want to, and there's plenty of blame to go around for the mess this world is in, but don't lay it at God's feet. It's not His fault. What about Satan? is it Satan's fault? Yeah, I mean he's the one driving the poor decisions behind the king. He's driving the pride and motivation of Haman to try to destroy the Jews. He's the one that drove the Jews to rebel against God in the first place. Satan, obviously. So, plenty of blame to go around. The ones that I didn't put blame on in that list were the Jews, although you could say in some ways in some ways they were reaping what they sowed. Esther and God were the ones that I didn't have as being to blame there. True or false, the Jews prevailed because the government officials were on their side? No, they prevailed because who was on their side? There you go. That's right. Now, we're told that all these people got killed, and among them we're told the 10 sons of Haman were killed. What's significant about this? Yeah, exactly. That's right. Like he's like not only Haman, but also his lineage is wiped out. So, yeah, that's true. Yeah, there's no one to seek revenge, and there's no, every man, I think, wants to hold on to the idea that his descendants will survive after him. I've got 2 sons. I want the assurance that, that my lineage will carry on after me, because that Smith name, it's in danger of dying out. We got to make sure that name gets preserved. There's so few of us in the world, but this was further punishment of Haman, that his sons were also killed. So, yeah, very much so. So, and there's a spiritual truth here, and you see it played out a lot in the Old Testament, but you see it in the New Testament and even in modern day that my sin, and here's the lie that Satan will tell us. Your sin only hurts you. Yeah, I mean, you'll hear, and I'll hear people say, well, I know what I'm doing is wrong, but I ain't hurting nobody but myself. No, that's not true. When you sin, it hurts you. It hurts your spouse. It hurts your kids. It hurts your grandkids. It hurts your church. It hurts your community. It hurts the nation. It hurts the world. I mean, it hurts everybody to which your circle of influence is connected. And so, like my sins in some way affect my kids, or my grandkids, my wife. So Haman was this enemy of God and enemy of the Jews. His sins were, cost his sons their lives. Now, who's to blame for that? Mean old God for killing these innocent boys? I'm not convinced they were all that innocent to start with. But no, I mean, who's responsible for these men dying? Their daddy. So, yeah, don't ever think, and don't let Satan whisper in your ear and say, well, don't you worry about it. Hey, you ain't hurting nobody but yourself. You're always hurting more than just yourself. So, let's look on to verse 11 as we continue here. On that day, the number of those who were killed in Shushan, the citadel, was brought to the king. And the king said to Queen Esther, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men in Shushan, the citadel, and the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now what is your petition? It shall be granted to you. Or what is your further request? It shall be done. Then Esther said, "If it pleases the king, let it be granted to the Jews who are in Shushan to do again tomorrow according to today's decree. Let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows." So the king commanded this to be done, and the decree was issued in Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. Okay, so they did hang them after they're dead. Now that's kind of my, that's kind of a question down here in just a minute. But why would they hang? What would be the purpose of hanging them after they were dead? Yeah. So like think of it this way. Like if you go out to West Texas and you see these cattle ranches out there, you drive along a little ways and you'll see a dead coyote hanging on the fence that some rancher has shot that coyote, and he's hanging him up on the fence, and he's hanging that on the fence not to look cool to all the motorists passing by. He hung that coyote on the fence as a warning to all other coyotes that don't mess around with this ranch or your fate will be the same as this coyote's. It works too, by the way. So this was the idea. You hang these 10 men who are already dead, but you hang them up for everybody to see so that everybody who sees them hears the message: don't mess with God's people or your fate will be the same as their fate. So that's the idea there. So the king, he hears this report of all the people that are killed and destroyed, and all the damage. And he says, if they've done that in the capital, what else have they done in the rest of the kingdom? What else do you want to do, Esther? I'll let you do it, but what else? He was horrified at the report. Why was he horrified? Yeah, his kingdom was in turmoil. And his subjects were being slaughtered. Now again, whose fault was that? It was his fault, right? Now, you might have seen a stronger king, a better leader, might have stepped in at that point and said, okay, enough is enough. You've defended yourself. You've killed Haman. You've killed his descendants. You've gotten a victory over your enemy. Enough is enough, but not this king. He says, okay, you've completely thrown my kingdom into chaos and destroyed my subjects, but I'm going to let you keep doing it if you want to, Esther, whatever you want to do. And she says, what? I want what? One more day. I just want one more day. Now, why? Why did she want one more day of slaughter? Well, it had gone out throughout, but it wasn't complete yet, right? She wants to finish, because he says 500 in Susa. What else have they done in the rest of the provinces? In other words, this is the slaughter that I know about here because it's in the capital, but it's taking place over the whole kingdom. But she wants one more day. Why does she want one more day? Do what? Yeah, she wants to finish the job. To finish the job. Total victory. All right. And one thing, I'm going to drastically oversimplify some historical events to make a point. I realize that there are political and diplomatic reasons why things happened the way they did. And I get that, I understand that. But for the purpose of making this point, I'm going to drastically oversimplify the event. We were enemies with Germany in World War II. We're allies with Germany now. Why? And we did what? We finished the job, right? Total, unconditional surrender. We finished the job. We were enemies with Japan. We're allies with Japan now. Why? Because we finished the job. We did help. That's correct. You're right. We helped them. But first we had to finish the job, right? In the 50s, we were at war in a faraway land called Korea. One of the greatest threats to the security of the world today comes from North Korea. Why? Because we didn't finish the job. Now, I know there's diplomatic reasons why we did it. There's political reasons why we didn't. But I'm saying, had we have finished the job in 1950, North Korea wouldn't even be a thing now. They would be our ally, as South Korea is. Why was there a second Gulf War? Because we didn't finish the job in the first Gulf War. I know there's political and diplomatic reasons, and I get it. But you should understand what the point I'm making. Like, you cannot leave an enemy to grow another head and keep fighting another day. Like, you have to eliminate the threat. And so that was the idea. It may seem extreme for Esther to ask for this. It may seem as overkill, no pun intended, but it was necessary to finish the job, to finish it once and for all. Better to have one day of slaughter than to have a reoccurring problem for years and years into the future. All right. And we answered the question about hanging Haman's sons if they were already dead. And it says, interestingly enough, that they killed all these people, but they didn't lay their hands on the plunder. Why not? Exactly. That's right. They had a more noble cause than personal gain. It was self-defense. It was fighting a war for, as God's people, for God's purpose. So, they weren't there for personal gain. Questions on those verses? All right, let's look on to verse 16 then. We're only going to go through about half the chapter tonight, and then that should put us in a really good spot to finish up next week. Verse 16, the remainder of the Jews in the king's provinces gathered together and protected their lives, had rest from their enemies and killed 75,000 of their enemies, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. This was on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th of the month they rested and made it a day of feasting and gladness. But the Jews who were at Shushan assembled together on the 13th day as well as on the 14th, and on the 15th of the month they rested and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore the Jews of the villages who dwelt in the unwalled town celebrated the 14th day of the month of Adar with gladness and feasting as a holiday and for sending presents to one another. Okay, so this feast, it commemorates the Jews' victory, or the feast that commemorates the Jews' victory over their enemies became known as what? What? Purim, yeah, Purim. I was hoping everybody would get that because we just did that exhaustive study on the exhaustive study on the Jewish festivals, and we talked about Purim there. Purim, incidentally, it's either just happened or it's going to happen very quickly. Okay, so it was like last week was Purim. So I know you all celebrated your Purim holiday then. Purim normally occurs late February or early March. Remember, the Jews are on a lunar calendar, so it's not the same time of the month every year, late February, early March. Now, the capital of Shushan celebrated Purim a day later than the rest of the villages. Why? Well, not exactly to clean up their dead, but they weren't what? They weren't finished killing the dead. And so they weren't finished creating the dead. I don't know how you say that. Anyway, so the fighting extended an extra day in the capital, and so they were a day later beginning their celebration, and that's why there. Questions on those verses? Okay, I gave you a couple little application questions. Your coworker asked, how can a loving God sanction such bloodshed as we see in Esther chapter 9? What do you say? God didn't do it. What? He loves, yes, there you go. God is a God of love, but he's also a God of judgment, and he's fiercely protective of his children. The lamb of Scripture is also the lion of Scripture. It's two sides of the same coin. Now, it's good news for us because we are his children. And as fiercely as he fought for Esther and the Jews in Esther chapter 9, he will fight for us like that as well. He loves us that well. There is one of the letters to the churches in Revelation, and I can't remember which one it is. His promise to the church is, I will make your enemies bow at your feet and and know that I have loved you. What a promise. He loves us, and he fights on our behalf. All right, your friend says they're Jewish. Your friend says their neighbor is Jewish and invited them to a Purim celebration. Your friend says, I'd like to attend, but I don't know what it's all about. What do you say to them? Read Esther. They've come to you. You can't just turn them off like that. Go read Esther. Like the mean old grammar school teacher. Go look it up in the dictionary. Did y'all's teachers ever do that? Go look it up in the dictionary. Sure. Yeah. It's worth celebrating. I mean, I would go if, I don't know that I have any. I've never been invited to a Purim celebration, but if I were, I'd probably go. I mean, why not go? It's a celebration of something that God did to defend his children. That's worth celebrating. Huh? Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and you could lead into the gospel through that, for sure. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. 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 Yeah, I mean, it certainly seems as though you see a remnant of the Jews to the very end. I mean, that seems to be the way Scripture reads. So, all right. Well, I've enjoyed studying with you tonight. I hope the Lord has spoken to you, and I hope that that you received a blessing from it. See you Sunday, I guess, and we'll do it all over again. And hope you have a great week. Let's close in a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we do thank you again for your word, and thank you for the witness and testimony of